Thanks, Anne. We're delighted to be here because, as she said, the show had been postponed twice. It's been such a strange 20 months for all of us, and it's nice to be back in an art space and talk about art. I've known Tommy for quite a few decades, and known him in many different sort of manifestations. Curator, designer, web designer, film maker, producer. But when did the camera come into play in your life?
The camera. Okay, the camera. Can you hear down the back, by the way? Louder! Okay, well, maybe I'm going to be shouting all the time. The camera. The camera. I first bought my first camera at a customs auction back in the late 70s, early 80s, when cameras were mind-bogglingly expensive to students in Ireland, and customs used to seize cameras without backup paperwork, and they would have auctions. So I bought an Olympus OM10, which was a semi-automatic film camera back then, and I had a dark room, and my then partner Tanya Kang went on to found the gallery photography, still runs the gallery photography. So photography and cameras were an active part of what I did, but they weren't necessarily anything I would have identified myself as. You know, so I didn't do that. But they, like everyone in this room is a photographer. We all take photographs now, all the time. Then it was unusual to have a camera. To have a film camera was kind of unusual. But when did it emerge as, it was about as a practice, as a practice, yeah. I was always a bit nerdy, right? So I think I introduced you to computers back in the day. So I've loved technology and tools and things you can make and things you can do with technology. So I was an early adopter of computing in particular, which led into people getting me to help them with filmmaking, and it sort of stemmed from all of that. So technology was this, I always said, it's how I made money. It's how I had a salary going on. But it was after I had a heart attack. That was the key thing. I had a bit of a land about 5 or 6 years ago, when it sort of wakes you up a bit. You go, okay, things have to change. My own father passed away from a heart attack when he was 60. And I was in my then mid-50s, and so it hit me quite hard, actually emotionally hard, harder than even physically. And so I took time out of work. I teach in IT Sligo, and I took time out. I said, no, I'm not going to go back in, I'm going to take 6 months. And I have no spiritual practice or reflective practice or any point where there was a point for looking back at what I was doing, but I was certainly in need of one, something along those lines, and I took up taking photographs, and I didn't quite know why or what it was that I was doing, but it became about it became a tool whereby I entered into the world and attempted to make sense of it in a way.
And you did it at a particular time of the day, right?
I started, okay. So it was, it was. I'm wandering. The wandering, many ways wandering. I had still, when I took time out of IT Sligo, I still had a really full life. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. We have a film company. My wife's an active filmmaker and a scriptwriter. Life was full. Life was full, and I had to carve out time in the day. And so I took to getting up early. I took to getting up around 5 or 5:30 in the morning, which is, by the way, the best time to get up. There is absolutely hours in front of you when everyone else is asleep, and there is space for your head to contemplate or to do things. And so I started leaving the house, and I live in a village, a small village in North Leitrim called Drumahare, and I started photographing the streets at night in and around the village. It's a bit of a weird thing to do, you know, and you start going like, geez, I hope no one sees me doing this. Like, you start going like, I'm getting a little uncomfortable doing this. And so I wandered further, and I ended up climbing up mountains, because I would go a bit, do a bit of that before, a bit of hill walking. And so I would climb mountains at night. That sounds very romantic. It's like clambering up mountains at night. It's just, they're hills really where we are. And going up to the top of a mountain and photographing up there at night time. And there I encountered the bogs, the bogs at the top of our mountains. And that became a project called the Bog is Soft, whereby I had a few incidents in the dark falling into bog holes and, you know, again waking me up and getting me to look at my interaction with the land and landscape as something that might swallow you up. And I did a book called The Bog is Soft. I wrote a long form poem and a set of photographs leading from the village up the mountain to the top of the mountain to these, photographing these quaking bogs and sinkholes at the top of the mountain.
So your attraction was always to something non-figurative.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was always landscape.
It was always landscape.
Yeah.
I know you went on to do an MFA in
Belfast.
Yeah. And with Paul Seawright, the people who were there. And I was there when you did an interview with Paul Seawright, and it's interesting because I would have thought that Tommy, from the description, had an art practice, you know. But you said that they broke you down there.
Oh, they totally, yeah.
And how did that dismantling, like, how did that happen? Because you were quite, like, you were on your way, right? So.
Yeah. Well, you know you're studying in Belfast when they say, we're going to interrogate your practice. You know, and he demanded that I take a rigorous approach. Because if you are exploring issues where you look at non-rational engagement with landscape, if you're looking at landscape as energetic, as something which is kind of reaching out to you in a way, something that's actually, you're having a dialogue with it or you're immersed in it, that you have a rigorous approach to that openness. Because photography, I don't know if I'm speaking, no, photography is divided into all these different schools of photography, and they would be from a documentary photographic straight. The camera is here to record, you know, take a topological approach, like photograph each one. I borrowed some of that here with these, where I tried to take a certain approach to how I photograph them. And then there is the more sublime, romantic, kind of picturesque, beautiful tradition, which will be more emotional and responsive. And to walk away from that towards more rigorous look at landscape.
And can both exist? I mean, can
they
you
do,
have,
yeah. They both exist in these, I think.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So they made you, let's say, use the word rigorous and documentary, and I can understand that in sort of the rationalism of some of the photographs that have come out of those, you know, power and steel.
Yeah.
But you sort of like better take that mantle on, but avoid the
being boring.
Yes. Or being analog, being the straight one thing reporting another.
Yeah.
You've allowed something in here.
Yeah.
And when the Cillín started after college?
No, it was the last, like I submitted, the Bog is Soft ended up becoming the primary thing I did with the MFA, but then I moved into the Cillín project while I was on the MFA. Started it, and so it started the last semester. I teach also in the writing program and teach digital storytelling on the creative writing program in IT Sligo, and which was set up by this wonderful author Uillinn, who wrote the poem that's upstairs. And she said to me, "I'm visiting a Cillín tonight. I'd like to bring you back to tell you about these Cillíns," because she knew I was very interested in death. I was very interested in landscape. And so she took me to my first Cillín, which is upstairs. It's the one on the floating wall beside the poem, in Ballygawley in County Sligo, which was relatively close to my house. And we went up there during the day. We met the farmer, and he told us all about, I trim it once a year, and and he showed us all these various. There's like a wishing stone there. There's a whole set of folklore he was telling us. And it was very interesting. I was like, this is interesting. I took a few recce shots, shots kind of documenting it. I don't know what I'd do with this. And then I said, I should come back here at night. I'll come back here at night. And I asked him if it was okay if I came back. And he said, yeah, no problem, fire away. And so that very evening I went back and I went up and
by yourself?
On my own. Yeah. And it's up the top of a hill. And I went up and I spent time there. I have to always go back lots of times to these sites. All of these have been visited multiple times. I don't see it first. I know it's kind of an uncanny kind of site visit. You're a little unsettled by it. But it was when I was, and I took a few shots, but just taking a few shots, and it was when I packed up my equipment and I came back down the hill, and it was literally when I walked away from it, that's the point where I went, these men did this, these men walked away. They buried their baby and they walked away. And that's when I went, I think this is a project I have to do. That's.
And was it like, you say a project, or was that, you said that you didn't get the job that night?
No. I took 4 trips.
4 trips, and lighting?
The lighting, yeah.
The lighting? Yeah,
the lighting. Light's funny, light's odd, it's weird, it's mysterious, it's kind of, I guess it's our metaphor for truth, that there's, light is something, there's something really ineffable and mysterious about lighting. I keep trying to get better at it. It's, I don't know, it's, no, but the lighting's important, I think, but I don't know quite fully yet what it is.
But just on the mechanics of the lighting.
Yeah.
So it's one light source.
Oh yeah, the mechanics of light, it's one or two, sometimes 2. And the moon, I use moons. If I see when the moonlight's falling, sometimes I just amplify the moonlight a little bit if I need it.
Okay.
And there's long exposures, so they're almost all long exposures. So you'll see some movement sometimes in the trees. So typically, I shoot them all in winter because the leaves there's no leaves. I love winter. I love how the landscape's bare and how you see the form of the land and the leaves aren't in the way. And it's about quietness, and it's about not the vigor of life, but it's about things are quieter. Where was I? The shoot at night. The moonlight. Yeah, there's moonlight. I try to work with the moonlight where it is.
So there's quite a lot of time spent trying to get the lights.
Oh yeah,
right.
I'm shite.
Yeah.
It's like it takes an age to get right. Actually, yeah.
And does everything happen in the post like in the production when you're
almost nothing?
Nothing.
No, generally it's captured on the day. Sometimes I'm lifting the shadows of it. They're like just too dark, or there's the differential between the lit and the shadow is too much. So I might compress the contrast and then just take it down. But almost nothing in post, bar the decision to go black and white, of course.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
But I don't know work with your colour. Is there colour?
I'm shooting a series of photographs in colour at the moment.
And when you say like this was a project, so that moment when you turned around and you felt you were that everyman walking away from that gravesite of a stillborn or an early death infant. Was it then the sort of obsession? No, I have to find another one, or how did these places go to you?
There's a website. The archaeology.ie, you can search for all sorts of historical artifacts, and children's burial grounds are listed. There's over 1,500 listed on the island. There's lots more undocumented. And there's a lot of researching just practical stuff, where are they, how do I get in, can I find out who owns them, what are the access routes, what do I have to cross to bring all my equipment over there, is how to do it. And I think in the act of making or the act of doing, there's this, because it's so cumbersome and slow, and that also slows down, and that becomes like a meditative practice in a way, a sort of part of it all.
The ritual.
The ritual of doing this, yeah.
And what about permissions? It's interesting that you say about who owns them, because I often think that it's like stone surface that really no one owns them. They're on someone's land.
They're on your land.
But no one owns them. But
tell that to the farmer.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Was there a sense of possession?
I didn't meet a farmer who didn't know about them, who didn't care about them, who wasn't curious about them. They all wanted to know more. They were all curious for more information. There was one, that one at the very back beside Tomas with the weird branch that goes in. There was one, that one isn't an official Cillín, it's not on the official register. The official Cillín is about 2 fields over. And I went over to it and I said, I looked at it, this is a lodge, it didn't have any energetic value, it was like a lump on the ground.
Yeah.
I found out who the farmer was, and he went to it and he said, oh, you can go there all you want, yeah, fire away, shoot away. He said, but it's not a Cillín, I've been saying it's not a Cillín, the real Cillín's over there, and they've been burying babies up until the 1980s in this place over here, which is kind of amazing in itself. But so the local communities often have their own stories, their own kind of locations. So you have to go and knock on doors.
You said something there about how you knew it wasn't a Cillín because it didn't have the energy.
It didn't have the energy.
And is there
there is. Yeah, it's one of those. I mean, I studied mathematics and philosophy. That was my degree. I've read my.
You've been beaten up by the Northern Ireland Art Squad.
I've been beaten up by the Northern Ireland Art Squad. It's. I thought I was going to be a physicist when I grew up. You walk in there to these places, and landscape. Places, sites they're special sites. There are special sites. We all have individual special sites from our own childhood, our own history, our own paths through life. But there are sites that are special. I just mean special in the form of having other qualities, by virtue of what's happened there. And these places are energetic. Yeah, there's energetic qualities to them where you're thrown off. I'm frequently thrown off. When I say I'm shy, it's like I think I'm really bad when I'm in these places. As a photographer, I forget. Photography is quite technical. There's a set of steps to do and measure and take and adjust and decide. I want this in focus, that in focus. What's my bright spot? What's my dark spot? All these things to work out and evaluate. And it's just a set of steps you do. They would all go out the window in some of these places. There's one up there in Kerry, in Curramore, which is probably the most remote Cillín I went to. It's through the Gap of Dunlow, through the Black Valley, and there's another valley, and at the very end of that, there's this Cillín, which is in a stone valley, stone field, it's stone, the Cillín itself is just piles of stone on stone, it's unreal. I was there at 4 in the morning, and it was, two light stands went like boom, boom. Knocking my tripod over with my camera, I smashed the lens. It was about $2,000 right there, gone. And you go, okay, what was that? You know, what's going on? And what's going on? Like, what's going on? And you go, don't be silly, you stupid idiot. You know, you placed it badly, and then you just have to accept that there's, that you're not fully in command here.
Well, I think that probably goes to show, because there's that's because of the subject matter, because we're aware of it. The show has an emotional punch, you know, and I think that everyone who views this exhibition responds to that and responds that way. And it's like you're not allowed to leave and say, "Oh, that was a great show," because it's so much more than about the show, about the images, you know, and it carries more to it with the images. And I think that's probably why there's such broad interest in this area, and incredibly, it hasn't sort of been documented in this one before.
Yeah, no, it's, not going to disagree with you.
No, I know what you
You know, it's,
I mean, but two poets have responded to it.
Oh yeah, Uillinn, she wrote the poem, and Jessamine O'Connor, whose first book of poetry is just out. She wrote a poem in response to it. It's in the handout at the back, in response to the show. It's, I mean, these are ours. I mean, this happened here. We did this. You know, this is us. And there's something, you know, it's not that this didn't happen elsewhere. There's stories of this in other cultures, but it seems particularly widespread here. Maybe it's about being at the edge of Europe and about how the Cillíns are more they're more populous along the edge, the coast. As Una says, black dots darkening to the west, you know. So it's, you know, Mayo, Galway, Clare, Kerry in particular. It gets thinner the closer to Dublin, you know. But there's, maybe this is where, you know, it kind of, it tailed out, you know. Cromwell never got to Galway, you know. So it's, so it's resonant of us as a people.
Yeah, I think there's a folk memory or folk whatever. Yeah. That's why I think it touches us all.
Yeah, I mean, the archaeologist Marion Dowd wrote the piece, a great piece in the back of the book. She said that why I talked about photographing them is reminiscent of the folklore, that people talk about getting confused and losing their way and getting you know,
coming back or visiting them or whatever.
Getting people walking in loops and like, getting lost when they visit, you know, that there's a dizziness really to it.
And then go back to the practice. Like, did you have a sort of a set, distance between the camera and the Cillín, and did you have that type of discipline around?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I tried to. You know, it's not like photographing Becker's water towers, you know. You know, it's not like you can do anything. You have to respond to like a cliff at your back pushing you up into them, or you know, the land doesn't permit an easy thing. But I did want them surrounded by black. That there was a kind of a blackness between the Cillín and the camera. That it was, in a way, floating in a non-space, you know, floating in a blackness, each one. So I pulled back enough to do that. If there was any way I could capture a sense of interiority while outside, you know, so a sense of being in an interior space while being still outside, I went for that. And the ones upstairs have more, what they call air in them. They're more outdoors, they're more, you know, the sky, you know. Whereas a lot of these, you're kind of you're in a little room, which
I'm going to open it up to the floor now. Has anyone any questions?
Yes.
How do you deal with the energy that you had there?
How did I deal with it?
Yeah.
Not very well. God, my wife will tell you. I don't know. I sometimes think I know less and less as I go on, you know. So it's I dreamt about them. I dreamt about them. That's why I kept dreaming about the babies, you know. So that's and just having to. I would apologise whenever I went in. I would apologise. I would ask permission. I would do all of these things. I would say, you know, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I have to come in. I have to place the lights down here. You know, it's like, you know. And they go, ha ha ha, and flip it over. But it's you're hovering between things you accept and don't accept. You're hovering between things you know and you don't know. And there's things that are meaningful and you're not too sure why. And just going, okay, I'm having to go and just, my desire for command and control is now gone, you know.
Yeah, Dan, do you have a question?
Yeah. You talked about when you found your first Cillín and walking away from it, you got a sense of how the fathers must have felt after burying their child and knowing that that child was going to spend eternity in limbo.
Oh, yeah.
Is there an implied criticism of church doctrine at the time in this subject material?
Is there an implied criticism? I think.
Did you intend it?
Yeah, that's a big. I guess that's a big question. I mean, I would have a big criticism. It's the archaeologist Marion Dowd, I wish she was here actually. She says that patriarchy and Christianity arrived at the same time in Ireland, and we rituals which we have as a culture, as a society, as a grouping, reinforce existing orders and existing power structures. And exclusion from rituals also reinforce existing power cycles and power structures. So the church doctrine, I mean, this was practiced from about the 7th century, there's evidence from the 7th century on, but it was official church doctrine from, I think, the 16th century. So it took a while before it was adopted as dogma by the church. That's why they came up with the concept of limbo, was to cover this, like to cover unbaptized children, you know, that they were between heaven and hell. So these liminal spaces that these are in between two places, that the babies also occupied this limbo, this minimal non-space between two worlds, you know. But that extended to the mothers, you know, the notion of being churched. You know, my mother is here was churched after I was born. Like, so a woman was unclean after giving birth and had to be made clean in the church by a priest. You know,
is this something you thought about when you were actually exploring these?
Well, yeah, it was part of the research what I'm doing. When I'm out there photographing, I find analysis doesn't really help. You know, I find that it's too much noise in my head, and there's a shitload of noise in my head. Like there's a cacophony of voices in my head, all the different things that have made who we are. We're like Archibaldo's those portraits, you know, made out of vegetables. You know, there's all these different bits going on up here all the time, and so I find. I try to adopt a more meditative approach when I'm working, where I'm just focusing on doing the work and doing the piece and going there and being open to what the landscape comes back to me with. Yeah.
The images are extraordinarily powerful. I've been in many Cillíns, and you could have made a decision to photograph them during the day. I'm sure that would have been a wonderful series as well. So could you talk a little bit more about your decision to do it at night?
Sure.
Because technically, of course, more difficult as well.
Yeah,
it
was.
So what was that choice?
So the lady here asked why at night rather than during the day, the cold light day maybe. It's I guess about the fathers, about actually walking their steps. So I've done all of these on my own, and so it's been I've never taken anybody with me. So to a certain extent, I'm seeking to walk in their shoes a little bit, just to follow through that journey that they would have made, albeit they wouldn't have pulled up in the 4x4 and, as close as possible. But I am trying to echo the path that they took when they walk up and they walk back, So, and they went with their baby in a box or a basket and a shovel, and I'm bringing all my equipment and my bags, and so to a certain extent I'm looking to also echo what happened in the dark, because the babies were buried in the dark, and so I'm looking to bring it out into the light in a way, to bring it out into the world, so it's not hidden away in a remote place, but it's here in the middle of our culture, in our towns. Please.
So 2 questions, Tommy. First of all, I feel as if the space that you have provided between the site and the photographer, i.e. the viewer, creates a sort of anxiety in a way. There's this intensity where you're almost coming upon something and you're not sure if you should approach further.
Yeah.
If you should come closer.
Good.
So,
Sorry, yeah.
I'm wondering if that was sort of the organizing principle with these photographs I'm seeing here. And then the second question is, what did you do when perhaps you found evidence of other viewers in the site? Like, say, the evidence of other people visiting those sites, whether it might be a flower or something, because in a way, I've been learning the history about these Cillíns. I don't know that history at all, but in a sense, any kind of site like this has a kind of charge to it because of its history, but secondly, it has the charge of viewers or visitors that have possibly been there before.
Yeah.
And so, for example, did you find any kind of ephemera like flowers or anything that would have suggested the presence of other people paying respect, and then what did you do with that?
So what Lisa asked was 2 things. The second one was about, did I encounter other evidence of visitors, whatever it might be, tokens. The short answer to that is no, I never did. I never encountered anything at all. They were all quite remote. They're all unvisited to my knowledge. This site here, actually, Lechnarany in Leitrim, this is a huge site. It's at the top of a valley. I'm just going to qualify what I just said. There's a valley, the Glenad Valley, which is a beautiful valley. It comes in towards Mount Hamilton. There's at the top of the mountain, there's a cleft, deep cleft in the mountain, and a waterfall about twice the height of this space, plunging down into it, into what's called Pola Curry, the cauldron pool, because it resembles a bubbling over cauldron when the water's high. That forms a fetid, dark, damp little glen, which this is set within. So it's quite high up, you have to trek quite up to get to it. At the outskirts of that, there's a mass stone, an old mass stone, where they would have done remote secret masses during the penal times. I would find evidence there of people people would have actually little paganistic, animistic type circles of flowers, or there would be, so there was some evidence of private ritual, that people would have a private ritual doing there. There was nothing particularly to do with the Cillín though, which was further back in, deep in the this really wet, damp, boggy, fetid kind of site. This one, that's a big Cillín, but normally they're quite small. Most Cillín are quite small. There might be a couple of hundred babies maybe there, this one would have had centuries and centuries of it.
But they were sites of forgottenness, weren't they?
They were utterly forgotten. Yeah. They're more hidden than you know. This is a landscape for forgetting, is what Uillinn called her poem. And it was about it being obliterated. Like, no one spoke of it. You wouldn't speak of it. There was huge shame. So the family, there was an edict against having the husband and wife sleeping together if they had lost an unbaptized baby. There was no one would talk because of basically the shame that would be visited upon them. So it was about silence. So the silencing, and particularly the women they never got to hold the babies or give them a name, or to speak of them. They weren't to speak of them. So they were, so in a way that's partly why I have the poem on the wall. I wanted a mother's voice in the show, and not a sidebar, but central to the show. So her poem is a voice for that. I also wanted words. I wanted the hand painting and the hand writing of words, because again it was about tombstones. We have tombstones. There's a marvelous documentary on one of the longest businesses running in the States, a carver of gravestones, of course, the John Stevens Workshop. It's amazing. But one of the founders talks about how a tombstone is the briefest biography you will have. Your name, where you're born, where you died. And it will outlast us. It will outlast many of your influences, many of your residual works, or what you have done, most of us, for centuries. Your tombstone will still be here. But these babies had no tombstone, they had no words, they had nothing said, nothing marked. And so I just wanted I wanted words that said what happened to them. Here's what happened within this. Yeah. And you had a first part of your question which I completely forgot.
Anxiety.
Anxiety, yes. Is there an anxiety intent? There is a certain anxiety in the images when you encounter them. Yeah, that's when I think it's working. Now, some of the sites are quiet. Some of them are quieter than others, and some of them are more energetic than others. Some of them are just quiet there. But generally, there's a slow. If you're there, there's a slow seeping of despair that comes over you when you're there, and it's very steady. Steadily. You can't stay for long without it kind of getting into you. Yeah.
Question over here.
Hi, Tommy.
Hi.
I'm premises I said I'm not going to encourage you to practice.
Sorry. Belfast man in the house.
Are you aware of, are you conscious of trying to subtract the kind of archaeological gaze when you're making the
Conscious of trying to extract an archaeological gaze.
Subtract it, to differentiate the work from an archaeological representation?
Oh yeah. I mean, this isn't a simple documentary act here. No, it's not. It's a response, and it's a personal. It's a very much. It's not. No, it's not an archaeology. It's not. Yeah, I know. I didn't. It's not a straight kind of. Here's the ones in Sligo. Here's the ones in Leitrim.
So maybe what I'm trying to get is there a constant sort of tension or dialogue there?
There is.
Something that you have photographs that don't work because they're too documentary-like or too unstaged, or like is that something that you're technically constantly competing with is the patch.
I wouldn't in my decision making necessarily orient it around that axis, right? But that is an axis that's in play, absolutely. So you know it when you see it. It's what I mean. You know, you're in the making of it. The frameworks that documentary approach brings are really useful. I find they're really, really useful. But in a way, what embodies a kind of performative aspect of my own engagement with it requires that I'm actually a little more open than those strictures require, you know. But yeah, I do move between those two things all the time, yeah. And sometimes I think they've all settled in and around the same kind of zone, this particular work. And maybe it could well be that my decisions around that are for this project, you know. It could well be. So, but I think there's a certain amount of openness, or what would you say openness is a terribly laden word. I don't know. Sometimes I think I'm not as interesting as the world. You know, like, I mean, it's like the world. It's more of the world that's interesting than what I am. So for certain things, I go, like, I'm doing a series about my father's paintings at the moment. You know, so I'm photographing where they're hanging in the context of the walls that they live on, and the other people's lives are in there. You know, so I don't know if I'm particularly in that work. You know, and maybe I just don't know where I am in that work just yet.
It's just another work.
Yeah, it's another project. Yeah. So, but what they're doing, or what those people have done with their rooms and environments, I'm finding fascinating. Like, I really love the detail of life that's in them.
And is this is the coloured project?
That's a colour project.
Yeah, yeah. And is this near completion or in completion or?
Well, it's in train.
This is train.
This is about 10. I'm happy.
This is what we look forward to seeing.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. And that's a good question, though.
Any other questions? Well, I just want to thank you, Tommy, because I just think that you're not only the photograph's so strong, but you're incredibly open about your practice. So thanks a lot, Tommy.
Yeah.